Okay, welcome to Dynasty Saturday Night 5. We are live here on the Going for Two Live YouTube channel. We are a Dynasty Fantasy Football podcast from the Going for Two family of content. Please subscribe, rate, and review if you're on the audio feed. Please, if you're here watching us on the video, like, comment, subscribe, notification bell, all that jazz. Feed the algorithm monster what it must be fed. Back from migraines and a trip that he went on. My co-host Josh Walker. Josh, how you doing?
I'm doing great today, actually. Just to update you guys, I know you all care so much about Ronald Acuna's historic season. He just joined the 40-40 club. He's on pace to have 40 home runs and 70 stolen bases, which has never even been close to being done. So baseball's been around 130 years. That's pretty impressive. So I know you all were dying to know about that. But, yeah, I'm good. Everything's good. Notre Dame plays tonight. We got football tomorrow. I get to listen to Scott Hansen, so that's good.
Trivia, fun trivia. I think this is the correct trivia. Who was the first member of the 40-40 club?
Ooh. I don't know that off the top of my head.
I'm pretty sure it was Jose Canseco.
That sounds right. I knew it was in like the 80s, early 90s. I was going to say Barry Bonds, but I think that sounds right.
I was kind of a Canseco fan, but even though I was a Mets fan, like I liked Canseco, but I guess I like the bad boys. All right.
Hey, bring back steroids. That's all I'm saying.
You know, there's an argument to be made that, like, what's the difference between that and, I don't know, LASIK surgery to improve my vision so I can hit better? Like, who the hell, but I don't know. That's a whole other, right? And who the cares about baseball anyway, because we are a Dynasty Fantasy Football podcast. For those of you unfamiliar with the show, or for those of you who forget, we use lists of 5 simply as our vehicle to discuss Dynasty Fantasy Football. Tonight, the list of 5 is mostly just going to be what are some stories that have developed over the first couple of weeks, what's our take on them, and what are we doing with them in those hot, sweaty, although it's fall now, pumpkin spice, Dynasty streets. But before we get started, we like to kind of have just some general thoughts. I just put some loose stuff here on the show sheet, and I kind of want to start broadly with like changes that are going on in the NFL, right? So we talked over the offseason about how, these offenses were, spreading out more, employing smaller players, explosive guys, they're good in space. Defenses responded by smaller personnel spreading out. And now there's this trend to sort of, as offenses mix in, more of the power run game and 12 personnel and things like that to respond to those defenses that spread out, to respond to the offenses that spread out. And then the defenses this whole time also, have moved largely because of analytics, from what I understand, towards, let's stop explosive plays, right? Mm-hmm. And so you're getting these 2 high safeties. We'll let you, dink and dunk and matriculate small steps, but we're gonna keep the explosive plays limited. So now these offenses are saying, okay, well, how do we deal with that, right? So offenses are trying to become more versatile, have more answers, right? If you look at what the Buffalo Bills did this offseason, they got better intermediate targets because they lacked that, right? And they got ostensibly what we thought was going to be a better power run game with Damian Harris and Latavius Murray. So now that offense is versatile. It's got an answer for different defenses in different situations, right? And you've seen them use those different defenses in different situations. And so that macro picture for our micro stuff is really, really interesting because on the one hand, a guy that we're going to talk about later on tonight, Puka Nakua, he's benefiting from this. Let's limit the explosive plays, right? I'm just going to sit here in zone in an intermediate route, and find the pocket and, make myself a friendly target, and boom, there you go. But at the same time, it's also important to identify explosive players who might in space be able to beat or transcend, these defensive trends. Guys like whatever, Jahmyr Gibbs or something like that. And so it's kind of making our fantasy life, if you will, a little harder, I think, to kind of suss out, who are the guys to really focus on? Because I was talking with Jacob last week about, we can say, well, bet on, year two wide receivers who are athletic freaks with really good numbers, right? But then it's important to kind of suss out among that archetype, among that profile, which are the ones that are really worth betting on, and what kind of micro decisions are we making, because that gives us even a better edge. And we're all now doing this in the context of only 2 weeks of data, right? And trying to strike that balance between adapting, from our priors with new information, but not overreacting after 2 weeks of data from our priors, because, we had priors and maybe the priors were good, right? So all that to say, there's a lot going on, right? And I find this year really fascinating in the first couple weeks as the NFL is changing quickly. And I think the Dynasty streets are reacting very quickly also to value spikes and things like that. And, sometimes you're going to find an edge, and sometimes, you're going to step in doo-doo and make a bad trade. So what have things been like, for you these first couple weeks of fantasy football?
The main thing I'm noticing is I'm starting to have to look more into what defense each team is playing to kind of gauge how I think a player is going to do that week. Because a lot of teams have adjusted, and you can kind of get a general idea. Like, we knew the Chiefs would play a lot of man against the Jaguars, so Christian Kirk was definitely due for a bounce back like we saw.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not something I really had to pay much attention to in the past. Like, you just look at the overall strength of the defense. But guys like Puka, if they get on, go up against a team that doesn't run as much zone, I'm not really sure. It'll be interesting to see how his success will be. So I think actually looking at defenses as opposed to, at a smaller level, as opposed to just looking at the overall rating against fantasy points, I think that's been something I've done, especially in DFS. It's helped me this year.
For sure.
A lot of teams are running the Tampa, kind of similar to Tampa too, keep two safeties back, everyone covers their zone and keep everything in front of you, bend but don't break, and then make them put up points in the red zone where it's the hardest. So I think that's something you're going to have to look for receivers who are not just like freaks against man, but really good against zone, because players like that, like Puka, guys like Cooper Kupp, which he can win on both, but guys like that who really know how to work against zone, Keenan Allen, he's having a huge year this year, and I think that's going to help. So maybe more rounded, well receivers as opposed to just going for the physical freaks who have holes in their game.
Yeah. To be fair to Puka, he is winning from what I saw against man as well.
Mm-hmm.
But, just the idea of, I think the NFL overall plays 70% zone now, and he has like a veteran's feel for sitting in the zone, and also just where he's running the routes on the field, whether it's man or zone, play into, the bend but don't break, I think defense. So
yeah, he's got a 3.1 yards per route run. So he's not just running little dink and dunk, little slants. He's running intermediate routes and deep routes too. So which we'll talk about that more in a minute. But yeah, I think look for more well-rounded receivers. Like Zay Flowers is doing well because you can get him in the zone and he can make people miss and get yards after catch. So
yeah, it's really interesting, right? Because I remember bringing up somebody right before NFL draft. I loved Josh Downs, but I was kind of thinking like, well, if the NFL is moving back to more 12 and more power run to counteract this, you can be small and you can be slot, but if you're small and slot, right, like, and you're not playing outside at all and you're getting taken off the field, like, how much does that affect it, right? So, yeah, it's and you mentioned the defenses. Like last week, I played some Debo in DFS because he's a zone killer, right? Mm-hmm. And the team he was going up against, played more zone, right? So, it's these micro decisions based on these macro trends, and it's, I think, getting harder to find an edge in fantasy football. I don't know.
No, it is. You got to take some shots. Like yesterday in one of our leagues, I started Tank Dell over someone who was projected like 7 or 8 more points than him just based on the thing. But I liked his matchup being a slot receiver against that team that was bad against slot. So you just have to do a little bit more work and looking for prep for each week. But it's, it's worth it because there is good data there and you can really use it to your advantage.
Absolutely. All right. So before we get started with our list of 5, let's pay some bills. The show is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. As per usual, Underdog has it all, right? Best ball draft season, hot best ball summer. It may be over, but, we've got pick'ems. We've got their Battle Royale, DFS. We've got sports besides football, which I'm told exist. I don't really know about them, but they're there as well. So if you are a new depositor on Underdog and you use the promo code GF2, whether on goingfor2.com or the Underdog app, they will match your new deposit up to $100. For those of you watching here on the video feed, we have a nice, shiny, sparkly QR code that you can scan, and that'll take you to where, if you are a new account, you use the promo code GF2, and you will get a deposit match of up to $100 on your first deposit. I deposited and spent a lot of money this summer on Underdog, more than I expected, and hopefully it turns out okay.
It will. What could go wrong?
Yeah, well, everything. It's like so like the other night, my brother texted me. And after Nick Chubb got injured, which I wasn't watching because I don't like primetime football, and he's like, "Do you got Chubb?" And I said, first of all, that's a personal question. But anyway, so the point of the conversation was, listen, man, like, you don't understand. I got so many leagues and so many formats, and then like DFS, like everything that happens in every game is both bad and good for me, right? So I don't get caught up in anything. It's just like, all right, watch the games, have fun, see if we're collecting any money at the end of the week, and move on to the next. Yeah.
No, it only takes about 10 leagues to where you're like happy that someone on one of your team scores, and you look and you're playing against them in some other leagues. So yeah, it's you just watch and just hope for no major injuries, really, and just enjoy the day.
Yeah, the idea of like a sweat, right? Like, I just don't, man. I just watch I have my Scott Hansen on in the background. Sometimes I pay attention, sometimes I'm doing something else, and we'll figure it out.
Yeah, I'm in enough leagues to where if I just completely bomb, then it's just it's just laughable because that's just really bad luck. Like, I'm gonna do good in a few leagues just based on the number of leagues I'm in. So
right, all right. So we've got our 5 topics. Which one do you want to do first? Does it matter? Do you care? You want to start with Puka since we've already been talking about it?
Let's just get it out of the way.
Let's start with the greatest wide receiver of all time, Puka Nacua. And you can say that, right? Because he's the greatest wide receiver through 2 games. His career has only been 2 games, so therefore he has the greatest career of any NFL wide receiver of all time. Let's put him in Canton. I joke, but I think this is a really good conversation for Dynasty process from a lot of different angles, right? So I'll tell you my Puka saga. I talk a lot to Matt Hicks, the FF educator on Twitter, rookie big board, Patreon and all that during draft season. He really put me on to Puka. He was a big Puka guy, like from like day one. So I was kind of like, he was definitely on my radar. I was above market on him, like the whole process. And the idea with Puka was a little bit on the older side, I think, if I remember, but not super athletic, not great at running routes, not super great hands, but more like he had intangibles. He had a sense for the game, and he was versatile. Could be used as like a running, with rushes as well as receiving, et cetera, et cetera. Certainly had heavy heavy target volume, on his team and that sort of thing. So there was stuff that pointed to him being someone to keep your eye on, but we weren't talking about him even as much, even as highly as we were talking about guys like, Rashee Rice or Jonathan Mingo, right? So, and then he goes in the 5th round, right? And, he goes to a team that, 5th round, day 3, not very athletic. The aging quarterback who didn't look good last year, and the offensive line, which was pretty questionable, and a team that we didn't know really what the results were going to be with that team. So you're grabbing them in like the 4th round of rookie drafts, and in some rookie drafts, probably post draft waivers. So I think I got like 5 shares of Puka, right? And I've sold 2, right? So after week 1, I sold Puka. I traded Puka and a 4th for Michael Wilson and a 2nd, right? And for me, that was a classic process sell, right? You have a day 3 wide receiver who was a middling prospect who had, a really good week 1. People seem to be overreacting. You cash in for a 2nd. He's got an elite wide receiver coming back in a few weeks. There's a window to this optimism that we can have on him. Cash out, right? And I'm going to win more of those than I'm going to lose over the course of, whatever. And so that's a bet that I'm going to do most of the time, right? And then after week 2, I traded him straight up for JMO, right? And that's the one that Paul put on Twitter, and I got dragged on Twitter for taking JMO for Puka. And friend of the show, Tom Tipple, didn't like the trade, and we talked a little bit on it about it on in our sleeper league chat. And for me, I still stand by the trade in the sense that it's a process sell, that I'm selling a guy who, we're looking at his ceiling, really, I think. And I'm trading him for a guy who I have ranked, like 19 spots higher at the time. I think the falling knife of JMO has fallen and it's rattling on the floor, and it's okay to pick it up. A guy whose talent I love, right? That's a trade, especially if I'm keeping a few shares, that I'll usually make. What I did not anticipate was to wake up the next morning and find that the Dynasty community had lost their damn minds and were throwing around firsts for Puka. So Tom's critique is correct in the sense that what Puka can get you, right? He's worth having more on your roster than JMO, right? Because JMO's not even playing, right? And Puka, so he's not producing, and Puka can get you a first, which I wasn't anticipating. If I thought that was going to happen, I would have asked for more. I would have countered. He's right in that sense. I think I'm right in the sense that it's still a process sell for a guy I like better. And while Puka does play his snaps on the outside and the inside, he's not just a slot guy. In fact, I think it's like 70% on the outside. When Kupp comes back, he may not so he may have the Robert Woods role, but he's got Kupp level volume. And when Kupp comes back, that's not going to be there, right? Mm-hmm. And so is what you're getting with Puka post Kupp worth the first plus that you're throwing out for Puka now in these first 2 weeks? To me personally, no, it's not going to be. Now the one caveat to that is, what if Kupp doesn't come back, or comes back and he's not healthy, right? He's just really slowed down, and the hamstrings are going to bother him all year. That's when I'm going to feel like crap. So for me, it was, I had 5 shares. You sell off 2 for whatever they call that, arbitrage, hedging, whatever you want, right? And then the 2 that I sold off were process sells. I can see where somebody could critique both of them, right? And so for me, it comes down to, are we now in the situation where Puka is one of those guys that you now sort of peel away from the archetype or the profile and say, okay, that's a guy worth betting on, right? Like, this is what I was going through with Jacob last week, right? Like, this guy, but not that guy. Well, no, you have archetypes and profiles. You have heuristics. You have rules of thumb. But then, well, now to get a better edge, we have to say this guy, not that guy. And is Puka now that guy? Like, he's got an excellent feel for the game. Will the volume stay at a level where you're going to be okay to have spent a first, and in some cases first and second, I'm seeing moved for him? Are you going to be okay with that price if Cup comes back healthy?
Yeah, I'm not. I did like you did. I actually, weirdly enough, had him in 5 leagues. I traded him in 1, but I wanted to. Well, I just lost it. A month ago, I traded for Puka. So before the season started, and I ripped the guy off, and I traded away Trey Lance, Jerry Jeudy, and Tyquan Thornton, and I got back Stafford, Madison, Puka, Kadarius Toney, and Jacoby Myers.
Looks pretty good.
So the Puka, I got him just to throw in Puka because I was starting to get a little bit of FOMO because I'd seen the reports through training camp. I saw that he looked a little bit better than I expected him to. So the way I see it, if you have him and you're good on receiver, I would try and sell him. But otherwise, most of my leagues, I'm just going to hold him and see what happens. Because a lot of the people I've tried to get a first for, they don't want to. I think you really got to find the right person who's just dying to get Puka on their team, who might have traded him away and wants him back. So I'm holding right now. I'm going to hope that in the leagues that I hold him, that Cup comes back. He's slow to come back. So even when he's back, he's not, he's not doing full route participation, maybe running 50, 60% of routes. And I mean, I think a lot of this, it's making me wonder really if this is a Sean McVay wide receiver 1 is just going to be set up to get a lot of targets and a lot of looks, or if it's just the player. Because Cooper Kupp was a solid receiver, but he kind of came out of nowhere there. So I don't know if Sean McVay figured something out, and Stafford's the perfect quarterback to make quick reads and get it out to his first wide receiver. Because in my opinion, Stafford, when he's healthy, he's a top 5 quarterback when it comes to knowing what the defense is doing, getting the ball out, and arm talent. He doesn't have the rushing ability, but he's a really, really good quarterback that gets overlooked, and he's healthy. So I think wide receiver 1 and 2 in that team, so even when Kupp comes back, I think he's still going to have some value, just not for a first. So I'm going to hold him, just see what happens in most of my leagues, but I sold him for a 24-second, which is, looking at the Bulletproof Trade Finder, that's kind of where most of the trades are. There's a few, but a lot are going for seconds, and I'm okay with even.
I think it's starting to calm down after the early week frenzy where people were throwing around firsts. I'm not seeing that consistent getting a first for him in some of these trade databases in the last couple of days. I think Puka fever really was at a fever pitch, if you will, earlier in the week. So I was listening to Stealing Bananas podcast. It's Ben Gretch and Sean Siegel. Great podcast, good conversation between two smart people. And what Gretch was saying was, people were asking him, what do you sell Puka for? And he's saying, don't sell, right? Because the way to get an edge is you have to find the outliers, right? You have to find the guys that beat the pattern, that beat the archetype, the whatever, right? And to an extent, I agree, right? Like our dynasty fortunes are made on the impact of sort of our highest upside players, right? And sometimes when we're making those bets, we miss. I maintain that, yes, I've been on Puka the whole time, but this is a little out of control because if Cup comes back in a few weeks and is healthy, Puka may have the Robert Woods role, but he's not going to have the Puka volume that he's not going to have the Cooper Kupp volume that we're seeing. And with a 34-year-old, quarterback, like, situations change faster than Puka's talent will, right? Like I don't know that you're going to be happy you gave up a first and a second for him in 2 or 3 weeks. So
yeah, I can live with the second because looking at his college, he only had his best year at BYU was 800 and something yards. Didn't have a ton of catches, so I don't. And now he's averaging through 2 games 17 targets a game. Like that just kind of came out of nowhere, and it's hard for me to wrap my mind around that it's going to keep up like that, and that's just going to be the guy he is, moving forward. So,
all right. I hope everybody enjoyed the Toronto Dave loves the meme game. Yeah. All right. So our next topic, which one you want to do?
I'll go ahead that way. I'll go ahead and knock the Falcons out. So it's not just talking about the Falcons, mainly talking about Bijan, Pitts, and London. Bijan came out of the gate looking honestly better than I expected him to. I expected him to, take a few weeks to get his legs under him, but he's an even better prospect than I thought he would be. Bijan's a plug and play almost every week in DFS and fantasy. It's definitely worth the price he was going for. Now, the other guys, it's a little more bleak. Drake London didn't get in the end zone. Kyle Pitts is still getting overlooked. And I'm starting to change my tune on Desmond Ridder just a little bit. It's only 2 games, so I'm trying not to overreact, and it's an ugly system to be a quarterback in, but he also just does not look that good. He was like close to top of the league in turnover-worthy plays. He threw his first interception the other day. So you got to hold Pitts. You can't – his talent's too good. He's still a top 1 or 2 tight ends in overall talent, probably even the most athletic until Bowers comes into the league. But it's really tough because you spent high draft capital on him. If you traded for him, you sent a lot. And it's just brutal that he's stuck in the Falcons offense because I don't think they're really as good as their record says they are. I don't think they should be 2-0. I don't think they'll keep winning like this because their offense is anemic. I don't think Ritter's that good. I think they really screwed up by not going after a quarterback last year, and they're not tanking. So I think they're looking at mediocrity, especially for London and Pitts, and wasting draft capital. So I'm kind of down on Atlanta outside of Algier and Bijan. What do you say?
Yeah, well, we've joked on the show before how like Arthur Smith is dumb, and like we joke he's not dumb. He's actually a really good offensive mind with the pieces that with the quarterbacks that he's had in Atlanta. He's doing what you probably should do, right? Like Matt Wallman did a really good film review on Ridder showing how like, he's not seeing things well. He's not reacting to things well, and he probably doesn't have like permission yet, to do pre-snap changes. And so, if I were Arthur Smith, I would run the offense that he was running too if Desmond Ridder was the quarterback. Unfortunately for us, Arthur Smith can weave together 9 wins, maybe, right? Doing that with Desmond Ridder and that offense. Going into the year, the idea was, okay, if we just get a few more pass attempts per game, just a little bit more volume, right? It's going to be so highly concentrated into London and Pitts, it could really be good, but the pie probably wouldn't be big enough that both of them go off, right? So for me, I largely bet on the unicorn at the premium position versus versus London. Through 2 games, I mean, they were, London was a goose egg the first game and Pitts barely registered, and then London had a solid game the next game and Pitts barely registered. So right now, it's London in the win column, and for me, and this is, I think, team dependent, depending on where you are as far as like the cycle of your build, but I mean, it just screams buy for me for London and for Pitts. We know their ability. We know the underlying metrics about targets per route run and air yards and all that jazz that they've had, in their brief time in Atlanta and in their brief time together. So, Adam Harstead says, situation changes faster than talent. And they're very talented guys. And I think you may have to wait till 2024 to where either the quarterback or the play caller is different. But they're still guys I'm betting on at their age, at their talent, at their already proven ability to command, targets and volume and things like I'm there for it. And I think this is a really good, buy opportunity for them. Now, on the flip side, if Pitts is your tight end one, or if you were counting on London, right? Who by the way, I think has a smaller target share and shorter ADOT than Mac Hollins does this season.
Probably.
What do you do, right? Like, who are some guys that you're targeting to make up for that? The natural idea, especially with if Pitts was your tight end one, is to have insulated yourself a little bit with some other bets, whether it's high end rookies or cheaper vets or things like that. So maybe you have a Hunter Henry, to lean on. Now, I think at wide receiver it becomes a little trickier because you can look for other wide receivers, or you can say, well, it's points and I just need points, right? And it's not a premium position. So I can suffer maybe at wide receiver, but beef up at running back or flex or whatever, right? So are there guys, that you're looking at that might be good bets to make or good trades to make if you're someone suffering through? By the way, Arthur Smith, fuck you. Just real quick, like
No.
he goes out of his way to bring fantasy into the conversation in the press conferences when it's not a fantasy football question. I'm sorry. So was that you saying no more Arthur Smith?
No. No. I feel the exact same way. That it's, and I talked about this I was on Kyle's Full Press Packers show before the Falcons game. And I was like, I'm so torn because I do want them to win, but at the same time, I really don't want Arthur Smith to win because I want him to not be coach anymore.
Yeah.
But if he's winning, I'm a fan, so I want them to do well more so than fantasy. So it does kind of suck. But to answer your question, I'm starting to honestly think about maybe going and trying to trade people like Sam Laporta for Pitts. They see another young tight end who's actually producing. You might have to add something on, but I'm starting to think about the leagues I have trying to do that to get Pitts on my team. Because this year, like especially Durham Smythe, Troutman, they're all guys you can pick up off the waiver wire and just plug in and at least get 7 to 10 points. And that's even without a premium. So I think now's the perfect time to buy Pitts, even if he does have to sit on your bench. I think there's some guys you can go get, Njoku's starting out slow, Juwan Johnson, Gerald Everett, guys like that are guys hopefully you have on your bench and you can plug in while Pitts is struggling. But Laporta or some other young tight ends are some guys I'm trying to go trade for Pitts.
Yeah, Laporta is really rising up people's boards now. And justifiably, good usage, good targets in the first couple games.
Yep.
All right. I just looked, and surprisingly, I only have 2 Pitts shares and only 1 London share. So I don't know. Look, I might have to do some shopping. Go look at one of my teams that looks like it's trending towards not competing this year, seeing what kind of discount I can get on a London, right? Like right now, you might be able in some leagues to get London plus for Puka.
Yeah. There was something like that. I saw.
I think you have to do that. Like, no?
No, I agree. There's a trade here, Puka for DeAndre Swift and a third, 24 third. So I think to the right person, you could definitely do that. Even if you got to throw on a 3rd or 4th round pick, it'd definitely be worth. Here's one that does involve London. It's Pacheco, Jacoby Myers, Puka for London and Jerome Ford. Like, I'm going to smash the London and Ford side on that because it's Pacheco and Myers and Nakua. So I think you can do that. You might have to, throw another guy in or two, but I think it'd definitely be worth it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Now, and that's I think one of the benefits of playing in a lot of leagues is that you can play around with this sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I had the 5 Puka shares. I said, you know what? Let me cash out on 2, right? Let me hold on to the others. See what happens. And so, I think you can pile up these 55-45, 60-40, bets and do well. And I think then that allows you to play around a little bit more with some other, parts of your portfolio. So yeah. All right. Let's see. I want to just make sure I want to hit this. No. Click search. Anyway, okay. So what's next? What do you want to do next?
Let's do Nico.
My boy Nico. Okay. Nico Collins, real interesting story, I think, this year. He was a guy that a lot of people were identifying, in the offseason as a possible breakout. My Nico saga is I was all in on Nico. I was a huge Nico guy. And then I lost faith for a little while. Like late last season, and even though he was getting increased targets, and then into the off season, I was like, is it ever really going to happen with him? Am I just kind of hanging on to this guy who was like, all right, he was underused in college and he's just a big old 6'4" ball of potential. And right. And sorry, Nico, that my trust ever wavered. And so I did trade a couple of Nico shares, but I've gone shopping since, and the price hasn't been that bad because I think people are still kind of skeptical. They got the rookie quarterback. It's a bad team. He's not a big name. It's only 2 weeks of data and that sort of thing, But when we look at expected fantasy points, air yard share, average yards per game, that sort of thing, Nico is an ascending asset that if you can go shopping and get him. What I've been doing on some teams is using my Kyron Williams and Jerome Ford shares to flip them for a couple Nikos.
Yep.
Because I piled up on Ford and Kyron Williams the last couple of years, and now I can cash in on some of that. I'm getting Nico. I would not be surprised if at the end of the season, we're looking at Nico as a top 20 dynasty receiver. He might already be, right, in some people's eyes. In that big tier that I always talk about of 19 to 32 or whatever, he's just about there for me. He's just under it for me already. Yep. And the one caveat that I would throw in that might give me a little bit of caution is as the team gets better and there's less garbage time, what's it going to look like, right? Is it going to be one of those things where, okay, now it's more efficient and scoring more, so therefore a rising tide lifts all boats and Nico's fine? Or is it going to be, well, fewer negative game scripts, less passing volume? Stroud leads the league in dropbacks already, right? Is the volume going to go down? Is the development of Tank Dell and maybe John Mechie comes around too, Noah Brown's on IR, so is it going to be one of those things where the offense improves and so he's fine because the pie gets bigger? Or is it going to be more of the idea that, well, it's a lot of garbage time. It's unsustainable levels of pass rate. And so, there might be some decline. Either way, his price has gone up, but I think he's still a guy that you're looking to buy because it's probably going to go up even more. And he's, 6'4", 215. He's an X. He's the number one guy there. He's the first read. Go get you some Nico Collins.
No, I agree. I actually just made a trade for him 5 days ago, and this is in a Devy league. So, the rookie picks are a little different. So I traded a 24 third round rookie pick and a 24 first, which after talking to Kevin from Football Guys, a late first in Devy, he kind of pushes it back to a early second, mid second. So I basically got that, a third and a first for Nico and a fourth So I thought that was a pretty good deal. I'm kind of needy on wide receiver. So I think you could probably go and, if you have an early second, do that. Or like you said, packaging these guys like Zach Moss, Jerome Ford, other guys like that to go get them. I love Nico Collins. I was probably like you were. We talked about it on one of our first shows, how we really liked him. I also kind of gave up on him a little bit, but he's doing everything right. He's doing really good with yards after the catch, which a lot of people were, at least early on, said he's not great at that, but he's doing really good at that. He's using his size to break tackles and run through routes, break through press coverage. Mm-hmm. I'm excited, and I don't see the volume dropping this year unless they go and fix their offensive line, because that offensive line it's okay for passing, but Dameon Pierce is getting hit behind the line. Like, his yards before contact is negative, I believe. Yeah. So it's, unless that happens, they're not going to be able to run the ball, so they're going to have to pass.
Yeah. They've already had injuries, and Laramie Tunsil's out this week now. So
yeah. So I don't think the volume, at least till later in the year, I think you got a few more weeks of heavy volume. And some people, I listened to a few podcasts, people were a little worried about Nico only playing maybe 60-70% of routes, which is lower than a lot of the X receivers, but they're dropping back so much. His total routes is still like 15th in the league. So
yeah, he was below. Yeah, he was below Tank Dell in route percent, route participation week 2. But I think the type of targets that Tank gets in garbage time are like, you're gonna, but like, are you going to see more of them in garbage time because it's bend don't break? But I mean, I don't know that, like, look at what he's doing on the routes that he does run, and he's already producing, either the routes go up or, his efficiency goes down a little bit. Either way, I think he's going to be in the ballpark of where he is. So yeah, I think you gotta love Nico. Kyle Keats checking in. Nico, the Michigan boy. Listen, Kyle, if you've got a hotline to Jim Harbaugh or anybody in the in Ann Arbor, the champions of the West, the leaders in the best, go blue and all that. Please tell them to use their wide receivers more and better. We would really like that, because one reason that Nico kind of flew under the radar, besides I think opting out of the COVID year, was like he was on a Michigan offense that just doesn't use wide receivers well. So it's like, well, he's got, 6'4", 215. He's got, athleticism, but we haven't seen him do much, And so, yeah, I think if you could talk to Michigan, that'd be great. Yeah. No, we don't want Michigan to turn into or to be just like other schools where it's like you can't trust their wide receivers. All right. Let's talk about Justin Fields.
Okay.
This might be where we lose viewers, part of our millions of viewers, but I have to talk about it. So yes, Justin Fields has played poorly, right? I didn't watch that JT O'Sullivan thing. It looked like it was kind of long, and I heard enough about it, where he buried him on that video and that sort of thing. And okay, I get it, right? He's missing receivers. He's holding on to the ball too long, right? Like, I get that. He himself has admitted he needs to play better. But what I'm seeing with Justin Fields is almost like another Trey Lance, where the organization is doing him dirty, right? When we look at Fields and the number of different whatever coaches, OCs, play callers, whatever that he's gone through, right, in his short time in the league, right? The terrible offensive line, right, that he's had to work with, right? And now this Getsy guy, right? He's essentially trying to make him another like Purdy type, like a drop back timing passer, right? And that's messing with Fields. And it's not just messing with Fields in that he's getting overcoached and he's getting coached counter to what his skills are. Listen, I'm no psychiatrist or whatever. I think it's getting into his head, right? And he's playing scared. He's not trusting his eyes. He's not making good decisions. And he's got in the back of his head, right, like what these coaches want him to do. For example, They changed his footwork where they want him to use like his feet differently or whatever. So now he's like thinking on the field. You can't think on the field. It's got to be instinct on the field, right? And so so his dropbacks are slow, and right, like what they've done is almost the opposite of what Shane Steichen has done with Anthony Richardson, right? Shane Steichen said to Anthony Richardson, "Oh, you're athletic and you're a good thrower of the football, right? But you might not be the best reader of defenses and processor at the moment. Okay, let me design an offense that fits that." And they're not doing that for Fields. When you look back at when Fields had his most success, right? We've seen it with design runs, and we've seen it when in like 2020, toward the end of the season, when Bill Lazor was calling plays, when we had, RPOs, play action, half field reads, right? And so, yes, Fields has played poorly. He's admitted as much. I will admit as much. My concern is the systemic issues that he's facing with offensive line, coordinator, coaching, etc. And that's the type of thing that can ruin a guy's career, right? I think the 49ers almost ruined Trey Lance. And I think I see a very similar thing going on with Justin Fields. And this is where we might lose people, because I want to talk about racism, right? We can't pretend that in a country that has systemic racism and implicit bias everywhere, that all of a sudden that stops when we get to the NFL, right? And black quarterbacks have had to endure a lot of nonsense over the years, and still to this day endure the idea of having the weight on their shoulders of representing black quarterbacks and quarterbacks like them, right? Whether it's the intelligence testing, right? Whether it's, Lamar Jackson and Anthony Richardson, he's a running back who plays quarterback. You can't watch football and say that about those guys, right? They may be a different type of passer and maybe, not as elite a passer as somebody else, right? But they're dismissed as athletic, right? What words do we use to describe guys like that? Freak, specimen, monster, right? What words do we use to describe other players? Gym rat, scrappy, leader, intelligent, right? Diagnostician, processor, right? And then what happens is the type of things that certain quarterbacks bring to the field gets valued over the type of thing other quarterbacks bring to the field, right? And it's that type of quarterback and that type of knowledge, right, where if you're not the reader and the processor and the diagnoser and the timing passer, you're not smart. You're not as good, right? You need training wheels. They need to be brought along, right? Because you're the black quarterback who's just athletic and throws the ball. I see this every day. I'm a high school history teacher, right? And essentially the cultural wealth that certain students bring to school is rewarded, and they see it more in school than the type of cultural wealth other students bring. The types of knowledge, the ways of being, the ways of acting, the way you construct knowledge, right? It's a white middle class colonial culture in public schools, and that's true everywhere in the US, right? And essentially we say this in education, that if you judge a fish by how well it can climb a tree, a fish will look pretty stupid. And all I'm asking the Chicago Bears is to not be Shanahan, right? And let this fish swim, right? And hopefully what we start to see is what we start to see last year, where it's like, oh, well, he can break fantasy if he runs a lot, right? And so design runs, RPOs, half field reads, play actions, right? coach to the guy's skills. Don't measure the fish by how well they can climb a tree. I'm sorry.
No, I don't disagree with anything you just said there. It's a problem, especially in the league, especially even with coaches. Like black head coaches get much shorter leashes than quarterbacks do. So I think you nailed everything right there about that. But about Luke Getsy, like you said to Arthur Smith, I'm going to say fuck you to Luke Getsy. This dude does not know how – he either doesn't know or he's just unwilling to change how he needs to run an offense. I've seen plays just looking on Twitter and looking at tape where guys are running curl routes within 5 yards of each other. Like one person can guard that. He ran the exact same screen pass twice in a row and got it intercepted. And like there's a clip of, I think it's either Levante David or Devin White saying to DJ Moore, he's like, man, they're not using you right. What are they doing? He's
and
like,
I heard elsewhere too that there was buzz that the Buccaneers knew what play was coming.
Yeah, because it's vanilla. And like just I don't mean to use that for the point you talked about earlier, but it's
appropriate.
Yeah, it is. And it's hurting everybody. It's hurting Khalil Herbert. He doesn't have near the efficiency he's had in the past, even with bad offensive lines. Like RPOs open up the running game for not just Justin Fields, but also your running backs. So that's just going to help everybody in the offense. It's so frustrating. I think he only had 2 designed runs through 2 weeks after almost setting a record for rushing yards and being one of the most elite rushers in the NFL. And looking back to college, say what you want about PFF grades. I kind of disagree with him too, but he had the highest college passing grade for one of his years at Ohio State. So it's not like he's bad at passing the ball. He's not just a running back that can throw. Like they don't talk about Josh Allen like that. So who honestly is I think he's just not bad at throwing, but he has holes in his throwing game, but they just don't talk about it like that. So I agree. I'm trying to buy Fields. I think it's a little too early to do that because I think the people who got him where they got him still have faith. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't hurt to start trying because I think, especially in a few weeks, you might be able to go in there and get him for pretty cheap.
There are people out there, and people who I think are very good at Dynasty fantasy football who are essentially saying, I'm off Fields. It's over for Fields. I'd rather have Sam Howell than Fields. Find those people.
I'll swap.
And I'm not saying I'm smart and they're dumb. I got it right. They got it wrong. I'm saying it's my opinion that the situation will change faster than Fields will become bad at football.
Yeah.
Right. And, that's all it takes. Go look at in 2020, he had like the game against Pittsburgh, or there was another comeback game that he had where he was just making these really sick NFL throws, right? Because, they had a run game and play action and stuff listen, what if Johnny Manziel was black? You know what the answer to that is? Go watch the documentary about Jack Johnson, right? Also, as Adam Harstead brought up, like, there could never be a black Jake Plummer.
Oh, yeah.
Like it wouldn't happen, right?
Ryan
what I mean?
Leafs,
right? Like it would not get the chance, right? So, listen, obviously this is a show about what to do with your little pixels in your sleeper app, right? But I think it's important that we know the context and the layers that go into what's going on in those pixels so we can make those decisions, right? Mm-hmm. That's the same reason I'm not giving up on Trey Lance, because there's context and nuance, is the same reason I'm not giving up on Justin Fields, because of context and nuance. And yes, systemic racism is probably a part in both of those. Yeah. It's just that, that's just the way it is. It's the United States, right? Well, it's the quote unquote United States on stolen land. We can't pretend that stuff stops at the NFL locker room door, right? Like, come on, people, what are we doing?
Yeah, no, I agree.
Sorry, I'm kind of soapboxy with that one tonight. Yeah.
Hey, I'm with you. I've been talking about black head coaches not getting the same leniency that the Rex Ryans and guys like this who have just been absolutely mediocre in the league get. So
listen, we know Lovie Smith's a boomer and all that, but like Lovie Smith had 10 wins as a Bears coach and got fired.
Yep.
How have they been since then?
Yeah, I don't necessarily like him as a person, but he got treated very unfairly.
Yeah. Right. Like, I mean, it is what it is, right? And so, so more practically speaking, I'll admit, knowing that in the at least in the near term, there's some systemic problems with the Bears and it's getting into Fields' head. I did knock him down in my rankings. I do have Richardson above him for the first time. Right. Like, because what's happening with Richardson is what you want to see a coach do with Richardson. So I think there's buy opportunities for Fields or Fields and a plus to get into that Herbert Burrow with his calf kind of tier. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And playing uncomfortable, you're not going to play to your utmost level. And it seems like he's playing uncomfortable due to those reasons.
So question in the chat about do we do fantasy football? Interesting, because this entire show is about fantasy football. What's the next topic we want to talk about?
I was going to let you, since you and Jacob did a whole thing about the last one left is running back carousel and injuries. So I don't know if you wanted to lead that one off since you guys talked running backs.
I think so. What I talked about with Jacob, last week was kind of what we started at the top of the show, identifying those guys on the right side of the curve and then sort of applying that to running back through the lens of betting on talent and then figuring out how these guys are going to be used situationally, right? What are these teams telling us about how they're being used? And now, right, we look at the running back landscape. Bijan's Bijan. But I think through 2 weeks, only has 48% of the expected fantasy points for Falcons running backs or something like that, right? So, like he's being Arthur Smith, right? But obviously we love Bijan to the moon. Breece Hall, to the moon. We love Breece Hall coming back slowly from that injury, stuck on a bad team, right? McCaffrey, I didn't think the usage was going to hold up going into the third week. Like, that snap percentage. Elijah Mitchell did get more touches. He is CMC. He's on a great team. Sure. I mean, we can have confidence in him, especially for the next year or two. Saquon Barkley, high ankle sprain. Jonathan Taylor, pup, and then mystery, question mark. Like, what's going on? Is he going to be even a Colt? Is he going to be traded at the trade deadline? Are they going to, shut him down, right? Pollard to the moon. Okay, we love it. We hit on Pollard. Okay, fine. Austin Eckler, injured, aging a bit. Josh Jacobs, off to a slow start this year. Offensive line doesn't look great. Did the holdout and career high touches. Has he now kind of lost a step because of that? And is he going to get it back? Right. Et cetera, et cetera. Dameon Pierce, what's going on with him? He's not getting used as much on third down as we thought, and he's stuck on a really bad team and really disappointing people as far as stats go. Javonte Williams, getting better usage than Samaje Perine, but certainly, splitting snaps and doesn't look like he's got that juice yet. He's still recovering from his knee injury. All this to say, that's why you draft and trade for the Jerome Fords, the Kyron Williams, right? The Tank Bigsbys, the Zach Charbonnets, the Chuba Hubbards, right? The Brian Robinsons, guys like that, right? Why you maybe stash or hold on to an Algier, right? Like, so there's been a lot of injuries. What are we doing now because of that at Dynasty running back? Well, for me personally, I have a lot of Jerome Ford shares, so I spun off a few and cashed out and did pretty well. For me, I had a good number of Kyron Williams shares. I was a believer, not in what he is now, right? But in the sense that he's a pass catcher, he can do pass pro. He's a competent enough player. His play speed is faster than his 40 time, as you saw at Notre Dame. He's worth holding on to. And so I've cashed out. You want to have part of your roster be able to benefit from the uncertainty, the chaos, the disorder, and the problems, right? Because they're going to happen. Running backs are going to get hurt. So how can your roster benefit from that? And so there you go, right? So if you did have a Dobbins, what the hell? I forgot even Dobbins, Achilles, right?
And Saquon.
Yeah. I said Saquon. But anyway,
okay.
Yeah. So, and Chubb's, knee is destroyed, right? So, I don't want to say, it's victory for 0 RB. I don't want to be like one of those people, but it shows you that like there's certainty in that running backs are going to get hurt, and you need to shape your roster that way. So if you lost a Chubb or you lost a Dobbins, hopefully you've got other options, but now you have to go trade for some of these Jerome Fords and Kyron Williamses and that sort of thing. And I'm not saying that I don't have a roster out there that was relying on a Chubbs or a Dobbins, and so now I got to adapt. But to me, it's why you don't spend a lot of capital on running backs.
Yeah, so there's either in my head, and this could be bad processing, just me being stuck on priors. I used to, before I really got into Dynasty, just didn't redraft, be robust RB. So I think you either got to do that and just because I have a few teams where I got guys like Mixon, Connor in my flex spots. So if you can do that, you can just plug them into the spots you missed. But I think the better way to do that is to maybe go for rookies or second year running backs and then just wait and maybe grab a few veterans after round 10, get Brian Robinsons, get the Jerome Fords. So moving forward next year, I'm probably going to draft guys like Brees, Jahmyr Gibbs, guys who are still very young and have not as likely to get hurt, and just wait and see what veterans fall around round 9 or 10 and just maybe get one in the first 5 rounds and then stack up on young receivers, tight ends.
Yeah.
So all this injuries definitely changed how I'm going to be drafting moving forward. And a lot of my better teams are ones that I didn't go super heavy on running back, and now I'm just plugging these guys in without even having to trade them away.
And Alexander Madison, there was a couple rosters, I will admit, I made a bet on simply, it's a bad bet to make, but I bet on expected projected volume. Right. Right. And look, he got Cam Akers by his team. Right. So you want to look at pass catchers. You want to look at guys who are injury away. You want to look at the discount guys. You want to look at the younger guy. Right. You want to look at, importantly, bet on talent, exclamation point. Right. And that's gotta shift. Right. I mean, it's really interesting. Right. Because what we're seeing is the 2017 and 2018 classes get into that second contract right around the same time that the really good 2020 class is getting out of their, they're getting towards the end of their rookie deals, and we're seeing like, oh wow, right, like, this is now all completely different, than we thought with running back, and things change and life comes at you fast. So, it could be also a situation if you're one of those people who says, zig when people zag, zag when people zig, let's see what kind of value falls, right?
Yeah.
Let's see, in the offseason how cheap some of these running backs are. Not that you buy a lot of running backs early in the offseason, but let's see, right? If everybody's got, wide receiver fever, then there's got to be value somewhere else, right? And so look for that. Yeah.
And that's what made me say I think you can still make it work, because I have a few teams that are 4-0 using the median that I had drafted a ton of running backs and just got some middle round wide receivers, and I'm doing fine with that. So I think you can make it work. You're also just playing with fire, because in 2 weeks you could be down 4 running backs, and then you're definitely having to make some trades.
Right.
So I do think there is some truth to zig when people zag.
If you lost a Chubb or a Dobbins, Who might you target, right? I think a cheap veteran like Aaron Jones. I think Kamara coming back from suspension at a discount. I think Tyjae Spears is going to get volume still as they preserve Henry. I think, Jamie's boy, Roshan, has a path to, he has the most well-rounded skill set. And by the end of the year, is probably going to be the RB1 there. Brian Robinson, like I joke that he's discount Najee, but like he might even just be better than Najee, at this point, right? Like, Rashad White is a volume play. There are some sharp people who are really in on him, like JJ Zacharyson. There are some sharp people who are kind of out on him, like I'm not gonna say I'm sharp, but I'm out on him. And, and our guest last week, Jacob, right? Kendre Miller has an interesting path, right? I mean, obviously, you're probably paying higher prices than you wanted now on guys like Ford and Kyron Williams, but Tank Bigsby might be an injury away. He just came off a week where he had like 0 touches. Jaylen Warren is a guy to look into, right? Who I have ranked behind Ford and Williams simply because of the situation right now. But as far as talent goes, is probably more talented than at least Williams out of that bunch.
Yeah.
And maybe go grab him before that snap share starts to get a little closer. He might not be the next Tony Pollard, but he might not be the next Tony Pollard yet, right? And so maybe there's still a buy window there. A guy like Kenneth Gainwell is probably going to be more consistent and trusted by the coaches. And Swift is going to be a little more boom bust. I like Swift. He's more talented. I have him ranked higher. He's going to be the 1A. But a guy like Gainwell is a cheap guy to get. Chuba Hubbard is an interesting guy. I think he's improved as he's had time in the league. He came into the league as a straight line runner with not very good vision. He's become better. He's become more well-rounded. I think the team trusts him in all 3 downs if Sanders were to get hurt or not perform. Sean Tucker could steal Rashad White's job, although he didn't look good in week 2. So, I mean, all those guys are less expensive than some other options you have and have paths to not just production increase, but value increase.
Yeah, I agree. I think, and I'm actually going to defend Sean Tucker for the first time in the show's history. It's hard to look good with that offensive line. Like that offensive line is bad. So, I mean, I'm not the highest on Rashad White. I don't think he's that great, but this kind of reminds me, don't give up on volume plays. Like don't give up on Madison. I'm not too worried about Cam Akers. I still think Cam Akers lost a little bit from his Achilles injury, but he's still a good player. It's just 2 weeks. Like he played 2 good run defenses, Madison did. So their line's not great, but I think better days are ahead for some of the volume plays.
Yeah, which brings us back to what we were talking about at the top. Like, it's only been 2 weeks, and you're going to get some stuff wrong when you're faced with the choice of I should adapt and change my priors, or is that overreacting? You're not going to get every single one of those right? So as much as I try to lean into upside and ceiling more as the more years I have in Dynasty, I'm also somebody who can say, well, let's wait and see, right? Maybe that's an overreaction, and I might be wrong. I might be wrong that Puka's an overreaction.
Could be. I have a few teams that are 0-2, and I went through and I was like, should I start making some trades, start folding? I'm like, it's only 2 weeks. Like, I'm gonna give it 2 more weeks. After 4, maybe 5 weeks, I think you have a pretty good idea both where your team's at and where
like a quarterly check-in. Yeah, and then get active. Be the first one to decide to shed some points and get some draft capital and things like that.
Yep. Give it another week or 2.
Yeah. All righty. I think that just about does it, right? We had some good conversations about 5 topics. Please subscribe, rate, and review if you're listening to the audio feed. Please, if you're watching here on the video, subscribe, like, notification bell, comment, feed the algorithm monster what it must be fed. Time for plugs. Josh, where can we find you and your work?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Rotonaut. ROTONAUT, or on X. I'm sorry. You can find my rankings. I haven't updated them yet. I'm going to give it one more week. So after tomorrow, I'm going to go and update all my Dynasty rankings, do an overhaul. You can find that at goingfor2.com. And you can find, I'm going to start putting some of my DFS lineups in the Going for Two Discord. So you can find some of those there. You can find that at goingfor2.com or on Jess' Twitter. I think that's it. Yeah, I'm about to go watch Notre Dame beat Ohio State. So,
all right. Well, you mentioned the Discord. You can find that at goingfor2.com, where I have rankings and articles, less in-season writing. I'm more like update my rankings obsessively several times a day. That there's a lot to be said about that. That is, more about what's going on between my ears than some other, some other things, right? But yeah, Going for Two also has wide range of content for you, not on the site, but also pretty much a podcast, a live show every day or night of the week, including the Sunday start sit and DFS stuff. And man, like sometimes DFS is that oasis where it's like, had a rough week, Dynasty trade streets, or people are being cheap and greedy. Let me dive into expected fantasy points per drop back of whatever, and plug them in for $4,500 and see what happens.
Yeah.
But
hey,
yeah, it's any thoughts on this week DFS?
No, they're a sneaky game to maybe go after. It could flop. The Falcons and Lions. Not sure the Falcons can keep up, but that's got, if you're in, especially GPP, you might be able to get in on some low ownership on some guys in that. Otherwise, just go after the Vikings game. I mean, it's chalk, but I mean that's going to be a high scoring game more than likely.
Another sneaky game might be Denver, Miami.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think
it's another one of those things. If Denver can keep up and push them, it'll be really good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so
because Russell Wilson does not look that good.
The first 2 weeks, like I had a really bad week the first week of DFS, and a really good week the second week, and this is the first week of the 3 where I feel like I got my feet under me.
Yeah,
So who knows? That'll mean that everything flops. So yeah.
Probably.
All right, folks. Dynasty Fever at Dynasty Fever Pod. We're on a bit of a break, audio only midweek episodes, but we're on a bit of a break. We don't know how long, but we'll be coming back at some point probably this season. Find me on Twitter at @FFJunkie_. Get in my DMs and yell at me for calling out racism with Justin Fields. And thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. That's a wrap. And
go Irish.